Hi, Penny.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. As promised in a previous podcast, I begged Penny Davis, Wardrobe Supervisor on Broadway for many decades, who's now living the life in Miami in the 305. She still has the 212 area code, let me just say. But to talk about something else that she did here with me on Gigi in the 561, she graciously agreed because she knew I would keep badgering her until she did. Hi, Penny, again. Thanks again for being here.
My pleasure.
As we touched on the other day, I dug up this little factoid about you and your vast career and fabulously interesting career, where you had worked for a time with soaps. And back in the day, Gary and I, well, not really back in the day, just a few years ago, Gary and I were in New York, and at that time we both worked for a media company owned by ABC. So while we were in Manhattan hanging out and just having a good time, we were invited by one of the main honchos to come to the ABC Center there in the center of Manhattan. And he took us to lunch, and we had known him for a number of years. And so when we walked into his office, it was incredible on many levels, but there were all these TVs lined up and monitors, really, they were just monitors mounted in the wall. And in each one of those, a different thing was playing. And some of it was like behind the scenes while things were going on and different shows. It was just incredible what was seen there. And so then he said, hey, before we go to lunch, you want to, go, kind of walk around and see what's going on. So he took us into World News Tonight, and he was really funny because he was very, very high on the food chain. And what was hilarious is we walked in to some of these places, he's like, and you know how when somebody with power comes on the scene unexpectedly,
yes.
the room just goes silent. It's just like, and the newsroom there just World News Tonight just went silent as you walked in, and he was a tall, very sophisticated, very, imposing man. And he looked at us, he said, they have no idea who I am. And I thought, what a bet. And so he took us to the set of Good Morning America, which by that time they were done with the show, but they were the Teamsters were moving equipment and all of this stuff. And he said, go on up, get on the set, go take some pictures. So went up there, and I'm like, these Teamsters these men were huge and, doing they wanted to get done. They wanted to get out of there. It's like, I'm sure they were thinking, and so I'm like, are you sure that we should do this? He's like, oh, yeah, go on up there. And we did. And then the funniest thing happened. A couple of these big, burly guys were moving this. And I said to one of them, he was a young guy, I said, hey, why don't you come on over? Because would it be okay for you to be on the set and get some pictures of me with you? Mm-hmm. And he smiled, and he came over and sat down, and we took these great photos. And I thought, he wasn't scary after all. They were really great, and we had a great time. But at that time, I guess it has been really a few years because all my children were still being filmed there. And he said, our host said, if they weren't filming, I'd take you in there. But he said they're still in production. So we went on to lunch, and that was that. But as I mentioned to you the other day, my introductions to soap operas, hence sponsored by Procter & Gamble in the beginning, having a lot of Ivory soap commercials and stuff like that, was at a very young age. And it was with As the World Turns, because my grandmother was this huge fan. I was a little girl with her, and her story came on, and you had to sit down. But it really wasn't the first soap opera to be on, because As the World Turns is a sister to the show The Guiding Light.
The Guiding Light. I think that was the oldest, I think.
Right, and they merged from radio, at least The Guiding Light did, to TV. So you were there in Manhattan, and I think you said you worked in Brooklyn. Is that right? With the soap?
Very, very briefly. I worked briefly on Another World in Brooklyn. The NBC soaps shot in Brooklyn.
Oh,
okay. And the CBS soaps shot in well, actually the ABC, all my children, I think it was All My Children shot in New York City.
Yeah.
But most of the ABC, no, okay, let me start over again if you can edit this. NBC soaps shot in Brooklyn because Another World was an NBC soap. ABC shot in New York City over by Lincoln Center, and CBS shot in main CBS, which is on West 57th Street, and Guiding Light had its own studio on West 26th Street in Chelsea. I worked on Guiding Light over, I'd say I started there in late 1978. I worked there for about 4 months solid. Then I became like a regular fill-in because the hard part from our aspect, wardrobe aspect, is learning the characters and learning the actors because they use their names interchangeably off camera, and it can be very confusing if you don't.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and then so Guiding Light, I became a very valuable substitute when somebody was sick or on vacation or something because I could step right into the soap. And given that often what we call the same day could last for weeks sometimes.
Oh, really?
You know, I'd come back and go, oh, are we still in that day? You know?
Wow.
And the As the World Turns shot at main CBS, which is on West 57th Street. And they actually had two studios. And actually, Guiding Light did too, but they had its own building. Guiding Light was in its own building.
Oh, why would they have their own building, Penny? Why would they have their own building? Do you know?
No, I guess it just was because my first experience with soaps was with Guiding Light from late 1978 until, I don't know, I worked during the mid-70s off and on there because I was mainly a Broadway person.
Mm-hmm.
But when I needed to make extra money, it was a great way to make extra money because it had finite hours, and it was fun to jump in. They had offered. I'm sorry, I'm babbling. They had offered me.
No, babble. That's what a podcast is.
Yeah. I found television to be kind of boring work from my point of view. But so I didn't want to do it on a permanent basis, but it was fun to just jump in, and I did television that way, and that was fine. And I worked with CBS. That was really the only thing I worked with Guiding Light on with CBS. With NBC, I worked on Saturday Night Live and a few of the soaps briefly in Brooklyn. Because that was a rough life, especially if I was doing a show, because I'd have to get up at 4 a.m. They pick you up because they start shooting so early, and the ride to Brooklyn is long. So that wasn't something I wanted to do often. But then with As the World Turns, I worked there for most of the year in 1990, and that was it. I can only speak to 1990 events. And then that was kind of it for me with soaps. So my experience is 30 years old. Well, the soaps are pretty much gone now, but
they are. But as the world turns,
that happen along the way.
Well, I can see why it would be hard to learn the characters on a soap because some of these characters are killed off, then they come back as their twin brother. Or
I can tell a funny story about that very thing.
Oh, I want to hear it. My listeners and I here on Gigi and the 561, we are all ears.
This is something I learned along the way. But when I was doing Guiding Light, Don Stewart was a big heartthrob on Guiding Light. He played Mike. I think Mike Bauer was the character name.
Oh, okay, yep.
And everybody was in love with Don Stewart. And at one point in late 1979, I was doing a Broadway show called Romantic Comedy with Tony Perkins and Mia Farrow. And in the show was a younger actress by the name of Deborah May, who was great fun, and we had a lot of laughs on that show. And she said, I was working on and off at that point in the daytime at Guiding Light. And who should appear suddenly at Guiding Light but Debbie May? And I said, what are you doing here? She said, oh, they brought me in to be a love interest for Don Stewart. I said, oh, that's great, because he's featured so much. Anyway, so she was a hot and heavy love interest for a few weeks. And then she came into work at the romantic comedy one night at the theater, very downcast. I said, what's the matter? She said, they're going to kill me off. And I said, wait a minute. Now, this is important. How are they killing you off? Do you die on camera or off camera?
You're right. There's a big difference.
And she said, I don't know yet. I said, well, it's very important. And then she came in after she'd gotten her script. She said, again, downcast, she said, I'm dying on camera.
Oh, no.
That's a shame.
Yeah,
However, then, now wait, it's not over.
Okay.
Wait, there's more. So about maybe my time frame might be a little off because, as I said, it was hit and miss when I would go into work on the shows. I go into Guiding Light maybe a year later, maybe even 2 years. And who should appear again but Debbie May? And I said, what are you doing here? She said, they've brought me in as a love interest for Don Stewart. And I went, wait a minute, you're dead. She said, no, I'm a different character now. I said, how are they dealing with it? She said, well, every now and then, Don looks wistfully into the distance and says, you remind me so much of my love, Pam, whatever her original character name was. Right. She came in, I think it's a Dr. Renee somebody or whatever.
Oh,
and so that was the solution, was he would just look into the distance and recall his lost love.
Oh, that's a soap opera for you. Yeah.
And
you're never really dead on a soap.
No, except when, which brings me to I shouldn't blow it all at once. I'm shooting my wad here. With
That's so good.
With As the World Turns. Although even that, she came back from what I read. She came back later on. But As the World Turns was, the actors on that soap were great. And they were fun off camera. Because a lot of times soap actors take themselves, because it's a job in a way that's different from, I think, any other acting experience, soap actors can really get into their characters and become who they are supposed to be rather than who they actually are. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. For example, Michael Zaslow, who was a horrible, mean Roger Thorpe on camera on Guiding Light, could actually not behave very well sometimes off camera until you really sort of got to know him, dug a little bit deeper. But I think they have to stay in character longer than most actors. But anyway, on As the World Turns, it was quite a different atmosphere, and they were fun. And if I might babble for a minute,
please.
Who's going to stop me? There's almost one single person is responsible for sort of changing the whole nature of soap opera, and that was a writer named Doug Marland. And Doug Marland, whom I only met briefly once because he lived in some, palatial atmosphere somewhere and spoke from on high, was the head writer, I believe, originally for General Hospital. And that was a California soap, and that became wildly popular beyond anybody's dreams. And everybody wanted to hire Doug Marland. And so Doug was brought in initially to Guiding Light, and suddenly there was more humor in the show and tongue-in-cheekedness. And by the time I was working on As the World Turns, that had kind of been established, where really outrageously nutty things happened on these soaps. And I think Doug Marland meant them to be nutty things on soaps. A lot of people took them very seriously. But they were nutty, and all the actors knew they were nutty. But the one that I loved, the soap opera experience that I had that was the best, was on As the World Turns. One of the main characters and actors was an actor named Larry Brigman. Please don't ask me what his character name was. I should be able to look it up.
I think he played John Dixon.
That's it.
Yeah.
Dr. John. Well, Larry Brigman was he and Don Hastings, who played Dr. Bob.
Yeah, Bob Hughes.
Two very serious characters, and they were two of the funniest men I have ever met in this business.
I love hearing that. I love hearing that.
They were so funny off camera, you could die laughing. So anyway, Larry Brigman had been on vacation for several weeks, and the storyline got very hot and heavy with a character, with Duncan, who was Michael Swan, who was the Scotsman.
He was kind of a hunk, was he not? The guy that played Duncan?
In a very sort of rough Sean Connery kind of a way.
Yeah.
And at the time, he was madly in love with the character. Maggie was the actress's name. Maureen. Was it Maureen? I wrote it down. I actually wrote it down. Shannon was the character name. And he and Shannon had been married, and whatever the storyline was, they went back quite a ways. And anyway, then there was a character called Lilith, who was played by Sarah Bosford, who was actually an actress I'd worked with again in a Broadway show. So I knew Sarah. And when she came on the set, I said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" She said, "Oh, I play Lilith." And I said, "Who's that?" Because I'm ignorant. I don't watch the soaps.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Oh, I'm a bad character." Anyhow, Lilith, and this is the story now, Lilith loved Duncan very much and was very jealous of Shannon. And apparently she had Shannon killed. And again, off camera. But the day that Larry Brigman came back from vacation, we were shooting the hot and heavy scenes with when Duncan finds out that Shannon has been killed, I believe. Please excuse my foggy memory here.
It's all right.
And I had asked the prop man with, can I start over again? Can you deal with this if I start over? I'm just the story is confusing. Okay. You'll deal with this however you deal with it. She got killed off, and I asked the prop man, "How are we going to know this?" And he demonstrated a shrunken head that he had because Lilith had joined this African cult. It was the most absurd storyline. And when Larry came back, he came down on the set while we were shooting the scene about Duncan finding out about Shannon and the confrontation with Lilith and all this. And Larry said to me, sidled up to me, and he said, "So what's been going on?" And I said, "Well, Maureen," I think the actress's name was Margaret, she wanted to leave. And they actually, this is a little side note, they were not happy about her leaving at all. She wanted to go do bigger and better things and leave the soap. And so I think that was one reason why they killed her off this way. I'm speculating, please. I'm speculating. This is my own personal view.
Gotcha.
So they had Lilith. She was the queen of some African cult, and she got people to kill Shannon and shrink her head.
Oh, wow.
So I'm telling this story to Larry Brigman much better than I'm telling it now, but please forgive me, it was 30 years ago. And watching the expression on deadpan Larry Brigman's face as I told him about the comings and goings of Shannon and Duncan and Lilith was priceless. To me, that was the most absurd way to me that anybody has died on a soap opera.
But
by African, natives or something, and having her head shrinkers and having her head shrunk.
I think that if I'm not mistaken, and I don't want to be quoted, like I'm 100% sure, but I think there was a Whoopi Goldberg movie in the 80s called Jumpin' Jack Flash. And if I'm not mistaken, the actress that played Lilith in As the World Turns was had a small role in that because back then it seems like I went, oh, I recognize her, and I like you. I have not watched soaps in forever, but I believe that same actress did that. But soaps really do birth a lot of people that become quite famous. Julianne Moore was Franny Hughes on As the World Turns.
And she, and also we had Michael Park. Well, he's sort of, because Michael Park actually started with us in Smokey Joe's Cafe on Broadway, and then he got into the soaps. But there have been a lot of people who have begun, because it's one of my best friends, Catherine Hicks. And Kathy got
well, I want to interject right here. Married to Glenn Ford at one time, right? Isn't that right?
No.
Oh.
No.
Okay.
No, Catherine Hicks was on Ryan's Hope.
Oh, I'm talking about Catherine Hayes. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Kathy started on Ryan's Hope as a character named Hope. And
okay.
I know I'm digressing now, but I never understood about soaps, because my mother used to listen to them on the radio and watch them when I was a little girl, but I never really paid that much attention to them. I never got involved with it. And then in 1978, when I was doing tribute, as you well know, with Jack Lemmon, Catherine Hicks was in that show, and we had to redo a lot of her costumes. And so we were out of town in Boston with the show in pre-production, and I was assigned to re-costume Kathy, and because it was a shop show rather than a costume built show. So Kathy and I got to know each other very, very well, because we'd go out shopping every morning before rehearsals, and people would follow us around when they would spot Kathy. It was amazing. We would do this craft, and they'd be yelling after her, Hope, 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 Hope. And I thought they were like, are they religious fanatics or what? But it was
people really do. I mean, they get crazy about these characters.
Yeah. We were swarmed wherever we went in Boston, and I was stunned by it. And I said, because she was, to me, just like, an ingenue actress. And she said, no, I'm Hope.
You know what that reminds me of, Penny? There's another movie that is called Soap Dish, I believe. With Whoopi, and there's a scene in it where she's feeling, Sally Field's character is feeling really down, and so Whoopi says, come on, we're going to go, and they go to a mall, and then Whoopi acts like, oh no, it is you, and then everybody swarms around Sally, and she feels, but people really believe these, they get up into it. I want to touch, we're about to wrap up, but I do want to touch on one more really famous person that came from soaps, the director Mark Rydell. And if you don't know Mark Rydell, fill us in on some of the things he has been involved in.
Oh, well, I don't know Mark Rydell. I know he did As the World Turns, but it was at a time, I'm sorry to disappoint Japan, but it was at a time when I was not, like I said, I did the show for less than a year in 1990.
You may not have even been born yet when Mark Rydell was on that soap, according to my research, way back, like in the beginning. And it caused a big dust up on the show, but then because people were so mad, they killed him off in a car wreck. But he went on. He's one of the really, really famous people from
he directed The Rose. He went on to be a great, famous director. I think he directed The Rose, and that really catapulted him, that I know.
He really made the right decision in leaving. He knew what he was doing. Penny, one more podcast that I that kind of burst in my head while we're talking, really talking about Catherine Hicks, because some of these people, when you meet them in person, like Salma Hayek, when we met her, she's like this, she has this body that won't quit, but I mean, she is tiny. She is tiny. And I mean short and small. And I would like you to come back at some point. I know, on down sometime later, much later, and talk about those challenges of dressing. As you said, you took her out and you had to redo costuming and kind of dressing these people and what that entails as far as making sure that things fit and how you manage that. So I hope that you will come back to Gigi and the 561 and talk about that. And I so appreciate your time again today, because I know you have a whole lot of stuff going on in your life, and for you to take time again so soon, I really do appreciate it. And you know what a big fan I am of yours.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Really have enjoyed it. So everyone, I hope that you have enjoyed my guest today on Gigi and the 561, Penny Davis, who is now living a life in Miami, but spent so many years on Broadway, the boards of Broadway in New York City, with these great stories. She is a friend that has allowed me to be her friend, even though I have stalked her mercilessly through the years. But please do visit us. You can find our podcast all over the place. We're on iTunes, many, many, many platforms. Many different apps will take you to these podcasts. So stay with us and go visit us at northpalmbeachlife.com. Like Gigi and the 561, northpalmbeachlife.com isn't just about these areas. We go everywhere. We have people from everywhere contributing, participating, being gracious enough to be on our podcast and our website, as well as all of you great listeners. We appreciate you so, so very much. And be sure to stay tuned.